Okay. This is a shir on Likutei Sichos, volume 22, the Sicha of Shemini, number 2. Actually, while it's called the Sicha about Shemini, the connection to the portion of Shemini is because the end of the portion of Shemini speaks about the laws of purity and impurity. Particularly, there's a discussion there about what liquids do to generate and conduct impurity. Just give you not going to give a full thorough class about purity and impurity. That's a very, very complex topic. All the whiles remembering that it's not a physically measurable concept. It's tum'ah and ta'ara are purity and impurity as defined by halach, as defined by Hashem in his Torah, and then taught by our sages who derived from the Torah all the details. When it comes to transmitting impurity, there's something that always transmits impurity in a heightened fashion, and that is liquids. What is considered liquids, though? That's a discussion, not just anything that's liquid, but there are 7 things that are considered liquids halachically and that will therefore transmit impurity in a heightened fashion. One of those is honey. So it's, of course, water and blood and various other things. There's a way to remember it: yad shachat dam. But without going into it, dvash is one of them. Honey is one of them. So because the end of the portion of Shemini speaks about the laws of transmission of purity and impurity, it mentions the concept there also of liquids. So the authors of Likutei Sichos, for the portion of Shemini, they put together the talks of the Rebbe, which relate to this topic. And it happens to be that this topic is also the topic at the end of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the end of the Mishnah. The 6 books of Mishnah is a law that pertains to the last of the 6 books of the Mishnah is about purity, taharot, and the last tractate is about the laws also of purity and impurity. The last Mishnah we're jumping to, and this was actually said at an occasion where the Rebbe wanted to make a siyum, a conclusion of the entire Shas and the entire Talmud, and in this case, the entire 6 books of the Mishnah. So let's jump in. Paragraph 1. The last Mishnah of the 6 books of Mishnah, and that tractate of the last book is Taharot. Last tractate is Uktzin. Speaks about the details of impurity, the way it pertains to food, and its transmission, the way that water becomes impure, and the way water transmits the impurity onwards to other foods. So just for an example, if an impure food touched water, that water then becomes upgraded to a higher level of impurity than would have if the food had touched food without water. The second food would have been impure, but on a lower level of impurity. Once water touches it or liquid touches it, that liquid jumps to the highest level of food impurity and will then transmit that to the next food it touches. So it's important to know, is this liquid considered a conductor or not? So the last law in the Mishnah is chalot dvash, honeycomb. When do we consider them to be actually honey and therefore transmit impurity as if a liquid? I must honestly say, I don't remember ever seeing honeycomb and exactly at what level the honey oozes forth from it. But at some stage, honeycomb is a combination of both liquid and solid. When do we consider that the liquid that it contains, the honey that it contains, is now its own entity or is now considered to be liquid and not just a part of the solid comb? So Beit Shammai says, Mishiyeh Harer, for when he thinks about extracting the honey. Or a second version of that is Mishiyeh Charcher, from when he starts to smoke the honeycomb to get the bees out. Beis Hillel says, no, that's not enough. It only becomes considered liquid Mishiyeh Rasek when he actually starts to break down the honeycomb to extract the honey. Once he's actualizing the honey from the honeycomb, that's when it's considered liquid. Till then, any honey, even though it's liquid within the comb, is still considered part of the comb. So Beis Shammai holds, in other words, at the moment that a person entertains in his thought that he's going to take the honey from the honeycomb, and it already becomes considered liquid. However, according to Beis Hillel, it only becomes liquid once it's actualized, once actually the liquid honey has begun to be extracted in actuality. Okay, that's the last Mishnah of Uktzin, but the Mishnah continues. The next Mishnah, in other words, this is the second to last Mishnah of the entire 6 books of Mishnah. The actual last one is the one that follows it. And it follows. What does it say? Amar Rabbi Shimon Levi taught. Hashem in the future, in other words, when Mashiach comes, will bequeath, will give as an inheritance to each tzaddik 310 worlds. As it says, the verse says in Mishlei, Lahanchil oyhava yesh, which means I have good reward to give to my beloved ones, v'otzrotehem amaleh, and I will fill their storage houses. Says the Rabbi Shimon Levi learns the word yesh. Yesh means there is, which in the simple meaning here means I have plenty of reward to give those that listen to me. He takes the word yesh and says the gematria of yesh is 310. Yud and shin, shin being 300, yud being 10. And what Hashem is hinting to, says Rabbi Shimon Levi, is I have 310 variations of worlds of reward to give to the Jewish people. Amar Rabbi Shimon Mechalafta continues the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Mechalafta says, "Lo matzah Kadosh Baruch Hu keli machzik bracha l'Yisrael ela shalom." Hashem did not find a vessel that contains blessing for the Jewish people. The vessel he found that would be the best vessel to retain and hold blessing for the Jewish people is peace. Hashem gives strength to his people. Hashem blesses his people in peace. Before the Rebbe asks the questions he's going to ask, I want to jump in and ask a question. We live in a world where we need a lot of peace. I want to ask a question, which the Rebbe answers later in a footnote. But in case I don't answer it, you'll have to remind me. That's the question. The verse says Hashem didn't find a vessel that holds blessing for the Jews greater than peace. The only blessing, the only vessel that can really hold blessing down, that can really contain blessing, is peace. May I ask you, and if you're not Jewish, if somebody for the nations of the world is blessing, then not a is peace, then not a blessing, is not a vessel that can hold, that can contain blessing. So it would seem that peace, everybody knows peace is a good thing. And we should be promoting peace, not just within the Jewish community, as ambassadors of morality, of divine wisdom. If there's somebody that needs to mute, I'm hearing voices. If as ambassadors of divine wisdom, we should be teaching peace. And isn't peace a blessing for everyone? So hold that in the back of your mind, and the Rebbe will take us on a journey. And by the way, in a footnote, say, by the way, this will also explain why the word Li Yisrael is injected here, although of course peace is good for everyone. So we have to understand. But here's jumping back to the actual topic that Rebbe is addressing here. And that is the actual topic. We have to understand what is the connection between the last Mishnah that we just said to the teachings. Last Mishnah is beautiful. About peace, about the reward that's there for those that serve Hashem, right? Beautiful stuff. What is the connection between that and the previous Mishnah that seemed to be talking about purely and highly technical and functional laws of impurity and unimpurity, which, what does that got to do with that big universal concept of peace and future reward that Hashem gives? So the Rambam and other commentaries say that because now the end of the Mishnah is, that's it. I've taught you essentially the transmission of the oral Torah is done by the 6 books of the Mishnah. After that, the Gemara extrapolates from that, and after that, we have more extrapolation from that, and we have to distill the laws from all that. But the body, the corpus of Torah Sheba'al Peh really is Mishnah. So once the Torah has been taught, all the laws have been taught. Now the last Mishnah is, by the way, guys, I know I gave you a big mission of 6 books. If you keep this stuff, wow, 310 worlds waiting for you. Oh, that's nice, after he gave them The task list, he says, by the way, Hashem's not going to be skimpy on the reward. There's big rewards waiting for you. And indeed, so there's no connection intrinsically between the topic of the laws of impurity transmitted via liquids and the reward that awaits those that serve Hashem, right? However, just to say that that connection is somehow arbitrary and it's not really intrinsically connected, we find is a little bit still a little bit unsatisfying, right? Because we find many places of the Gemara where one Mishnah, the Gemara will derive things from the fact that one Mishnah is laid out in proximity to another Mishnah, even when they are in various tractates. In other words, sometimes a particular law was taught in one tractate and another tractate has another law. The question is, why was the order in this way? So here, when we're talking about two Mishnayos that are standing one directly after each other, shouldn't we see that there's a sequence here, that there's some kind of a connection? Now, of course, we can say that, the Rambam, obviously, his reasoning makes perfect sense. The second to last Mishnah symbolizes the end of the transmission of oral law. The last Mishnah is now saying, by the way, for all that I've taught you before, of 6 books, there's great reward waiting. But at least, says the Rebbe, at least we can try and find something to sweeten or to deepen what the Rambam's saying, so that it's not just this is the reward for everything, but there's actually a reason why the teaching of the honeycomb and the honey is the one that was chosen by our sages to be the one just before the next one, which is about the reward. Says the Rebbe, if we analyze the law, the argument of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about the honey coming from the honeycomb and its transmission of impurity, we'll see that it's actually connected to the reward that's spoken about in the actual last Mishnah. Paragraph 2. But first, let's explain what our sages said about teaching us the reward of fulfilling Hashem's Torah mitzvahs as the grand finale of the entire 6 books of Mishnah. And the Rebbe is going to ask a very fundamental question. Here's the question. To fulfill all these 6 books of Mishnah of oral Torah, that's not a simpleton. That's not a kind of half Jew. That's not. That's a tzaddik. That's somebody fully righteous. Somebody who does all the mitzvahs is called, perhaps not in the Tanya definition of tzaddik, that he has no evil inclination. He's a saint, but tzaddik in the sense that he's fully righteous. So the guy's kept all the 613 mitzvahs as explained in the oral Torah. Okay, and now what are we telling him? Oh, grand finale, you're going to get rewarded. But he already learned what it says in the Pirkei Avot. The Ethics of Our Father says that there's a fund of 3rd Mishnah of the Ethics of Our Father says, don't be like those servants who serve Hashem in order to get a reward, who serve their master, thinking about the reward. Be like the servants who out of a love for their master serve Hashem, serve their master. And you should serve Hashem in that fashion. So you're not supposed to serve Hashem because of the reward you're anticipating. More than that, the Mishnah says in Rabbi Shimon Levi says, not just they're going to have a reward. He says the verse that tells us about the reward is the verse in Mishlei by Shlomo HaMelech that says, Lahanchil oy havayesh. Hashem says, to those that love me, I'm going to bequeath to them 310 worlds. Now, that's not just a simple thing. You can serve Hashem. Many people serve Hashem. Serve Hashem because some people are scared. If they don't, who knows what's waiting for them? Some people just do it because they know they should. But some people reach a level that's called ahava, love. The best motivation, the real true motivation for serving Hashem is serving Hashem from love. And the Rambam qualifies that truly serving Hashem out of love is, to use the Rambam's to paraphrase the Rambam, Oseh ha'emet mipnei shehu emet. He does the truth because it is the truth, not because there's a Ferrari waiting for him if he gives a lot of charity. Hashem's going to reward him. Not even because there's some kind of a place in Gan Eden waiting for him, but simply because he loves Hashem, and he cannot think of doing anything better other than loving Hashem. That's why. So that kind of a guy, well, what are you going to tell him? That you have a spiritual Ferrari waiting for you, not just that 310 villas waiting for you in the Garden of Eden? Of course, we're not talking physicality, and it's incredible, and it's godly revelation. But still, he's there in an ecstatic summation of 6 books of Mishnah. I've done it. I've done all the mitzvahs because I love Hashem. You tell him, oh, by the way, here's your beautiful villas. I wasn't thinking about that. Why is that some kind of a grand finale? Bracket says that Abitaka. Those that do look. Those that serve Hashem because it's the truth, they are promised that Sof Hatova Lavo Biglala. In the end, they will be blessed with good. Just by the way, the third Mishnah. This is not here in the Sikha. I'm just giving you a little bit of background. The third Mishnah, which says Antignos said, "Don't serve Hashem for any ulterior rewards." He had students who veered off the path of adherence to the oral law, the Sadducees, the Baituses. Why? His students thought what he was saying is, don't serve Hashem for the reward, because he was trying to create a cover plan. In case there's no reward, you should never have it in mind anyway. And that didn't ring so well by them, and I guess maybe they were less altruistic, and they looked for alternative interpretations. So when the Rambam does say that that's not what it means, Sof Hatova Lavo, when you serve Hashem for altruism, in the end it will be good for you too. But that's not what you're searching for. That's not what makes you excited. That's just a byproduct. When you serve Hashem from love, it's incidental, and it's just by the way that everything works out for you and you have good. That's not your agenda, right? So why are we telling here, so to speak? It seems to be the finale is the reward. That's so anyone who's considering serving Hashem altruistically, don't worry. It's also the best physically and materially and spiritually and Gan Eden, but that's not what we should have in mind. So since the main agenda, the main tachlis, the main purpose of serving Hashem is to do it altruistically, not for the purpose of getting reward, how does it fit? How is it appropriate that at the end and summation of the 6 tractates, when you're talking about somebody who's reached the highest level, he's about to conclude learning the 6 tractates, and he probably didn't learn just for academic knowledge. He was learning in order to fulfill, and he fulfilled. We say you're going to have 310 worlds because you kept Torah mitzvahs. Interesting that the Rabbi here in the footnote puts out that really even Abraham Avinu is promised, you will have a lot of reward. Why does Hashem promise reward? Reward is not reward, you have to understand, is part of the journey as well. And we're going to elaborate more about this. If how shall I say? If maybe I'm going to just try a quick example. If you work on your, maybe you like working out, and you're working on this archaic exercise machine, and you're told if you do well on this machine, you're going to get a fully equipped gym. Is that gym a reward? That gym is an ability to further enhance your working out. So when Hashem says to Abraham, I'm going to give you, you will have great reward, it means to say you'll be given a higher capacity of relationship with Hashem, which will enable you to serve Hashem with turbo. It's all part of the journey. But still in all, we seem to be talking here about the actual, you can't compare the reward in any way to the actual connection that is created with Hashem by doing a mitzvah. So why talk about 310 worlds as a grand finale? So we have to say, says the Rebbe, that when we are talking about these worlds, it must be that it's not just reward in its simple context, as a payment for serving Hashem. Now, this actually must be, as we just described, it must be that the purpose, this reward that's being described, is the enabling of a much greater service of Hashem. To go back to the exercise room, yes, it's the working out, which is important. And Hashem says, if you work out on your old archaic machine, I'm going to give you this souped up major gym. You'll be able to, will you be able to go places? So this reward is not just a reward. This reward is part of the process of serving Hashem. And that's why it's of interest to the guy who's done all the Mishnah, he's done this, he slogged away, sweated away, doing everything. Hashem says, you know what's waiting for you? What's waiting for you? Imagine he's been plodding through, from city to city, but by walking. And now Hashem tells him, I'm going to give you a souped up jet. You're going to just, wow. That's enabling a greater journey, a greater experience, a greater connectivity with Hashem. So now let's understand, if we understand it as such, let's go back to understand the argument of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Paragraph 3. This is where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel's argument about honey and honeycombs comes in. One of the reasons why the end of the entire books of Mishnah, at least in the world of remez, in the world of hint, in the world of symbolism, one of the reasons that the end of the Mishnah speaks about bees is because bees, in the words, by the way, as I'm saying this, I'm seeing that Rebbe does not footnote this as being one of the reasons. I'm not sure if he takes it from somewhere, or it's a chiddush, or anyway, but it's not footnoted. But one of the reasons that we end with bees is because we know about bees that our sages have told us that bees are an allegory to the ultimate in serving Hashem. As we're going to say the Rebbe says, he's not going to say what this means yet. He's going to say it in chapter 7, paragraph 7. But let's just take it on faith that bees, the way bees produce honey, bees, the way they are industrious, shows on an unaltruistic kind of connection to their master, and it hints to, in our service of Hashem, a commitment to Hashem that is beyond any interest-free, altruistic, totally dedicated to Hashem, lishma, for the sake of the connection to Hashem. Now that kind of serving Hashem, where the entire purpose of the service of Hashem is not for anything else, it's not a secondary desire, but the actual primary desire is the mitzvah, is the service of Hashem, because it is service of Hashem. Not because the service of Hashem gets me somewhere. When I go to work, a person goes to work, he gets a paycheck. It's not the work he wants. It's the paycheck he wants to support his family. Here, it's not what comes after the mitzvah. It's the actual serving Hashem, and it's ultimate, like a bee that's unaltruistic, not motivated by self-interest. A Jew at the highest level is motivated by connection to God. That's it. And that's hinted at by talking about working like bees. So now let's understand where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing about bees. You know that we've spoken many times, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue. There's many other talks of the Rebbe where, and this the Rebbe quotes from others as well, that if you follow the track, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are always arguing, right? But if you follow the train of thought of all their arguments, you'll see that their argument is about, do you follow potential or do you follow actuality? So again, here the Rebbe just assumes our prior knowledge, but I'll give you something that we can all relate to. On Hanukkah, we light 1, 2, 3, 4 till 8. Beit Shammai's opinion is first night Hanukkah, light 8, go downwards, 8, 7 till 1. What's their argument? When you look at that oil, post Hanukkah, that one vial of oil lasted for 8 days. So if you look at potential, Beit Shammai says, look at that oil on the first day of Hanukkah, there were 8 days of potential light that we didn't know about, but after Hanukkah we know it burned for 8 days. So I want to recognize and I want to celebrate that potential that was there on the first day of Hanukkah. light 8. Beis Hillel says, yeah, but on the first day of Hanukkah, you only had 1 day standing. The second day, there was an actuality. You now unpacked the second day. So I want to unpack. I want to go based on the actual unpacking, the actualization, and that was 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8, right? So the question is always, you look at the potential, you look at the actuality. Now let's look at it here in the Mishnah with the honeycomb. Beis Shammai says, look, the moment you thought about or you smoked the honeycomb, you already there's nothing to stop the honey coming out but to actualize it. But it's there, potential, it's waiting to happen. You're engaged in it, even just in thought, but there's already a process begun. Beit Hillel says no, but it's not liquid yet. It's still ensconced. It's still part of the honeycomb. Do we look at the actuality or do we look at the potential? So this will also give us, and here's where we jump into existentialism. This will also allow us to understand, remember, serving Hashem, the bees, represents serving Hashem in the most altruistic mode. There's also going to be an argument about serving Hashem, a parallel argument between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel. Look at this, you're going to love it. It says that we all know what the reason for creation is. Man was created. Why was man created? Ani nivreisi l'shamish eskaini. I was created. The end of Masechet Kiddushin, the end of the Tractate of Kiddushin. Man is created in order to serve God. There's even a version that says, I was not created for any other purpose but to serve God. But man is created to serve God. There is, however, a difference, as we're going to elaborate more about this topic, but there is a difference between the absolute fulfillment of the human mission of serving God on earth, which will be expressed between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Somehow Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel are going to argue elsewhere about this purpose here on earth. Keep posted. Paragraph 4. The language of the Mishnah. Mishnah, remember, the Mishnah is succinct. The Mishnah speaks briefly. That's why we have to, if you look at the amount of Gemara for every Mishnah, you'll see that the Gemara needs to unpack. It's like the Mishnah is like a zip file, very short. And the Mishnah therefore has to be extremely precise. When you speak more lengthy, your words can be less precise because you're wordier. When you're less wordy, when you have to when you have to put down something into 5 words, you have to think which word take in, take out. For those of you who remember writing telegrams, when everything they used to write very, very short, right? So the Mishnah is almost, kind of telegram style. Not Telegram, the app, today's media app. Some people don't even remember. There was telegram, Morse code, then telegraph. So the Mishnah speaks very short. The Mishnah says like this: Lahanchil. Hashem says, I have what to bequeath. Now the word lahanchil is inheritance. Oh, 1 second. Hashem says, those that love me and worked for me, I have 310 worlds to bequeath to them. They're going to inherit 310 worlds. Now, you know the famous joke about the guy who asked his uncle, how did you become so rich? He says, I was collecting cans and I got a nickel per can. And then my great uncle died without leaving any heirs and I inherited $100 million from him. Oh, that's a way to get rich. That's a pretty good way to get rich. But you can't program that. Lahanchil, to inherit, is the exact opposite of earning. So how does it make sense that Hashem says, you know what the reward for the tzaddikim is going to be? They're going to inherit. Inheritance is not a reward. Inheritance is a byproduct of a line of succession. And it becomes even more difficult to understand because the same statement that Hashem is going to bequeath tzaddikim 310 worlds is said not just in the end of the last book of Mishnah, it's also in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, but the Mishnah seems to, our sages seem to use a proper language. By the way, what's the language? The language there is Hashem in the future, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu, liten, not lanchil, liten. L'chol tzaddik v'tzaddik shin yud olamot. Hashem is going to give in the future every tzaddik 310 worlds, not bequeath. This seems to be proper, because the word inherit, that doesn't fit for somebody at tzaddik who's worked. He earned it. So Taka the Gemara inside it says, no, Hashem will give. How do you reconcile that a Mishnah says Hashem is going to bequeath? Comes a Gemara set by a rabbi in Gemara. He can't contradict the Mishnah. He uses different language, but his language seems to be correct. Not inheritance, but rather gift. And by the way, we also have another big question. How can a rabbi in the Gemara come and change the language of the Mishnah? But forget about the changing. Isn't it a redundancy? Whenever we so to speak catch a rabbi in the Gemara saying something that was already said in the Mishnah, we treat it almost like, what is it called, plagiarism? We say, why is he saying that? Didn't we already teach it in the Mishnah? I don't need you to come in the Gemara and tell me copy paste of what was said in the Mishnah. It's in the Mishnah, said by somebody who's a predecessor of yours. The Rebbe says that's not the same statement. It's not the same statements. And once we explain it's not the same statement, so we understand. The Mishnah is talking about inheritance. How? Why? That we have to understand. The Gemara is talking about giving. He's talking about reward. We're talking about reward. The rabbi in the Gemara has said a new halacha. In the future, Hashem will reward every tzaddik for their hard efforts, 310 words. The Mishnah is coming not to talk about simple reward. It's at the end. The Mishnah is at the grand finale of the 6 books of laws. When you're talking about a tzaddik, you're talking about somebody who's fully righteous. He serves Hashem from love. Then Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, of course Hashem is going to give reward. I'm not talking about that. Hashem is going to give an inheritance, because the way that this transmission, this great level is going to come is not a reward in the simple sense of the word. It's an inheritance. What's the difference between inheritance and reward? Paragraph 5. Legally, in other words, when we think about the legal transition of entities one to the other. So what happens in a sale? In a sale, well, with physical objects, I have a cup of coffee and I sell you the cup of coffee. Now the cup of coffee has moved and gone to you. What happens when somebody passes away and he leaves a son, and there's a cup of, there's a mug on the table? Who does the mug belong to now? The son inherited everything. The mug belongs to the son. But what happened? Did the mug move over to the son's ownership? So the Roget Shover Goen explains, the Goen of Roget Shover explains, that the way that inheritance transitions from one to the other is not that the item moves conceptually. By the way, we're coming up to Pesach. When we sell the chametz to a non-Jew, the chametz stays in your house. But conceptually, the ownership has moved over. It's not like it's in it's not yours. It's moved over to the non-Jew. With inheritance, no, it doesn't work that way. With inheritance, the heir, the one who inherits, has kind of moved into the persona of the one who has bequeathed it. So what it says, Tachat avotecha yuvanecha, literally, it says in the verse, in Tehillim, in the place of the forefathers will be your children. In other words, it's almost like the person is there, the shell of the person which interacts with items, with possessions and owns things, has been vacated by the person who passed, and now the person who's alive, who has inherited that person, kind of goes in, fills the shoes, moves into the shell of that. Actually, it's called a shell company. What's a shell company? The holding company. It's almost like the soul, the new person who inherits moves into that shell, and now he owns everything that the previous person owned. It's a different movement. It's not the possession moving ownership. It's rather the owner being replaced. The owner becomes in the place of the new owner. This is what happens also when we talk about Hashem and the Jews. The greatest gift that can happen when a Yid learns Torah and does mitzvahs is what? What happens when a Jew learns Torah? He becomes one with Hashem. As we know, the Zohar says there are 3 things that are intertwined with each other: Hashem, the Torah, and Jews. It becomes one thing. Similarly, when we do a mitzvah, mitzvah has the expression of tzivu, which means commandment, but also tzavta. Tzavta means, we all know in Hebrew, betzavta, to sit together. Tzavta is connection, tzevet. So we sit, the mitzvah connects us to Hashem, because when Hashem tells us to do something, we do it because he said, that connects us to him. So in other words, when we talk about our connection to Hashem, really what happens is that we inherit and become one with Hashem. Well, we don't have to wait for the future for that, do we? Right now, we're learning Torah, doing mitzvah. We're one with Hashem, says the Rambam. The word yesh means existence. Yesh means reality, tangibility, reality. Says the Rambam, who's the real yesh? Who's the absolute, always, the absolute constant presence, past, present, future, is only Hashem. So the Rambam says what Hashem is saying here. I will lahanchil oyav hayesh. In other words, to my beloved ones, this is paraphrasing the Rambam, le'ohavai, to those that love me, anchil et hayesh hamuchlat. I will bequeath the ultimate existence. In other words, I will make sure he's one with Hashem, because kol nefesh etizkeh lechayei olam haba, any soul that merits the world to come, that oneness with Hashem, lo tichlel olam, will never be finished. It will be purely elevated, consummated, become one with Hashem. How is it possible that a created being should become one with the yesh hamuchlat, with the absolute? In Yiddish, there's a saying, Faranenkeit, with the absolute existence. How is that possible? It's infinite. It's limitless. So this says, you know how that can work? Lahanchil. Hashem says, I will bequeath to you. It's not like there's a giver and a receiver. Because if there's an existence, if there's another entity to give to, that doesn't work. How can a created being who's an entity receive the greatness of God who's infinite? So Hashem says the Jewish people are going to inherit. In other words, they're going to become one with the one that bequeaths them. Because ultimately the Jews are bonim, they are children to Hashem. And therefore, when a Jew learns Torah and does mitzvahs, what really becomes revealed, we don't see it now. When Mashiach comes and what becomes the impact of what we've been doing becomes revealed, then we see that we have become one, like somebody who inherits. We've entered the zone of oneness with Hashem, just like an inheritor enters into the place of the one who bequeathed him. Comes in his place, becomes one, so to speak, with him. In the laws of inheritance here in this world, that only happens when one person moves out and the other person comes in his stead. With Hashem, we're talking about the transactional mode of transmission. We're saying this is not Hashem giving reward. This is the Jew becoming totally connected, one with Hashem, just like an inheritor becomes in the place of the one who inherits. Now we'll understand about the joy, about the pleasure that this gives to the tzaddikim. And this is really, and by the way, here's where I want to jump in to the question I asked. It says, or should I come back to it? I'll come back to it. Remind me I have to come back to this. Okay. So paragraph 6, according to this, we'll understand that when we talk about the pleasure that tzaddikim have, what was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi saying? Hashem will give to every tzaddik 310 worlds. What does it mean? In our world, when you have 310 worlds, oy vey. See anybody ever that has a few houses? I don't know if you ever met somebody like that. I've met a number of people who have a few houses. It's a pleasure. You have to if one house is a problem, if the water is leaking, like imagine it's 310 worlds. That's what you're going to give me for serving you? No. The Rambam explains, you know what it means? It means like this, that the most exquisite enjoyment and pleasure you can have in this world, 310, magnified 310 times the greatest pleasure you can have in this world, times 310. That's what it means, 310 worlds, not headaches, 310 levels of enjoyment. So, come on, we're talking about a tzaddik. I don't want to even mention some other religions that talk about banal and carnal things. We're talking about tzaddikim, right? So we're not talking about tzaddikim's enjoyment, about the reward that the created being enjoys. Nah. We're talking here about the enjoyment, the nachas ruach of God. You know, in everything, there's the question, not what is meaningful to me. Mitzvahs are enjoyable. I'm not talking about eating a good steak on Shabbos or eating a good cholent on Shabbos. Okay, that's also enjoyable. But I'm talking even enjoying the fact that you're doing a mitzvah for Hashem, enjoying studying Torah, that's enjoyment. It's holy enjoyment. But it's still our enjoyment. What's real enjoyment? Hashem's enjoyment. You know where you can tell, there's one topic where we have Hashem's enjoyment, which is in stark opposition possibly to our enjoyment. You know where that is? Sacrifices. The whole beginning of the book of Vayikra speaks about sacrifices, and it says it's pleasing to Hashem. It's a pleasing fragrance. And many people, especially today, will balk at sacrifices. In the first place, Hashem never said we're going to enjoy it. Our sages right away say, why is it pleasing to Hashem? And does he need the burning sacrifice? He also doesn't need him. You know what he needs, what he wants. As the prophet says 2 weeks ago in the Haftarah of Parsha Zocher, what I want is halo shemoa mizevach tov la'akshiv mechelev elim. Listening, obedience to me is much better to me than a sacrifice. Hearkening to me is much better than the fats of the lambs. Hashem has pleasure from amarti v'na'aser etzoni. Nachat ruach lefanai. I have pleasure, says Hashem, because amarti, I said v'na'aser etzoni, my will was done. Hashem enjoys the fact that we're doing it for him and exactly according to the criteria he said, and no other agenda. And you know where you feel that most? In sacrifices. And possibly when Mashiach comes in 2024, we'll actually be able to reach that highest level, because I think in all of history, we're probably step by step moving furthest away from being able to actually see any, relate to animal sacrifices. So the further away we are, ironically, is actually the closer we are to doing it only for Hashem, and therefore the pleasure is Hashem's, because he sees you're doing it just for me. And that's the connection. So when we talk about the nachas for Hashem, so what are we talking about? The tzaddik is anticipating the pleasure of Hashem that he's moving into the zone of. Not 310 levels of his enjoyment, 310 levels of enjoyment of Hashem's enjoyment that he's, so to speak, partaking of, but not as his own identity, but as his almost identityless inheriting of Hashem. As the Rambam explains, why does Reb Shimon Levi say 310? He's saying that's just a way of derech ha'ara. I'm not sure what this means 100%. This is just a way of trying to enlighten and give us some figure. But of course, Hashem is, somebody has there a translation, al derech ha'ara. They translated it in English, so you can jump in. But really, it's an unlimited time. It's an unlimited, because Hashem's enjoyment is unlimited. And this is the difference between the schar mitzvahs, talking about reward for mitzvahs, which we said, come on, the end of all the mitzvahs, you're going to talk about reward. And the fact that what we're being told here is that Hashem is going to bequeath to those that love him the 310 worlds. When we talk about reward, about enjoyment as a reward for the service, which means to say that there's a recipient. In order to talk about reward, there needs to be a recipient of that reward. So that's limited to the enjoyment, to the pleasure that a created being is able to receive. However, when we talk about the fact that Hashem is in the future going to give to those that love him the 310 worlds, that has to do with Hashem's pleasure, with the pleasure that becomes to Hashem, because his mitzvahs have been listened to. This is not about the reward for the mitzvah. This is about Hashem bringing you into the actual mitzvah, to the essence of the mitzvah, connecting with him, with his command. not with what comes out through it, which is secondary, but with the mere fact that the mitzvah has created a bond between you and him, and you get to see that, to be there, to be one with him. That's the incredible thing that's awaiting when Mashiach comes. Paragraph 7. This is also why we talk about this reward coming only to those that love Hashem. Why? Because how can you come to this intense level? It's only when the way you serve Hashem is identityless, is not thinking about yourself. You're doing it just because Hashem wants you to do it. When a person thinks about himself, if he thinks about reward, or even thinks about his elevation, there's an identity there. Sometimes a person thinks about helping somebody else. Sometimes he thinks, I help somebody else, Hashem will help me. Sometimes he thinks helping somebody else is amazing because there's nothing greater than helping. You know what feeling I'll get. You know what elevation I'll get. You know how close I'll be. Not to try and get a reward, but you know how that will elevate. Giving is just elevating. That's also thinking about yourself. Doing it just because Hashem wants you to do the mitzvah. That is what has the capacity to bring you to a place where you can become one with Hashem without the limits of your own identity. Just like we find in halacha that a true eved, we say that an eved, a servant, whatever a slave does is really a representation of the owner. It has to be only it can only be with a slave. But there's something that happens with a slave that we don't have today, slavery, of course. But what a slave does, if a master sends a slave to do something, the hand of the slave is like the hand of the master. More than if you send a free person to be your agent. A slave is an extension of the master, because in the laws of slavery, he doesn't have any identity. He just transparently represents the identity, extends the identity of the master. When we serve Hashem, lishma, for no ulterior motive, we're able to be transparently vehicles of Hashem and become one with Hashem. And this is also why we talk about the honey. Why? Because serving Hashem in this way, where you're serving Hashem for only the right reason, for no other motives, is a form of allegory to bees. The Medrash says about bees, and I'm not sure I understand this fully. I didn't get a chance to look it up. Just like a bee, everything that a bee has or generates, it does to its owners. All that Jews do when they do mitzvahs and good deeds, they're not doing it for themselves. Really, they're bringing a benefit to their Father in heaven. And the Kantor explains, so that's what the allegory of bees symbolize. The Kantor explains that serving Hashem in that way means you come to the ultimate realization that your existence, the existence of man, is not for man itself. Although, really, the man, gets greatly elevated through the journey in this world. But really, it's not about that elevation. It's about, I was created to serve my Hashem. So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody's sent as a we have soldiers today fighting in Israel. Imagine that you say they're being very well paid. Okay, let's say. I don't know if that's the case, but I'm saying, imagine, okay, getting well paid. It's not the pay that's what it's about. That maybe just, they have to be paid. It's about the matara. It's about the mission. It's about the target. It's about getting what needs to be done. When we come down here on earth, it's great that Hashem gives us, if you listen, you get this, you get the reward. Don't get distracted by that. The agenda is to get Hashem's work done. That's what it is. So now we'll understand paragraph 8. When we talk about the Mishnah of the argument of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about the honey, we'll understand that there's also a deeper argument going on about the potential and actualization of man's mission here on earth. But first, let's understand another machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel about coming down to this world. let's look at this. Beis Shammai says you got to look at potential, right? So therefore, coming down, when the neshama comes down to this world in actuality, it's not a big deal because we knew that the neshama, I can't resist a little joke. There was a rabbi whenever he spoke, the big shot congregant in the front seat would fall asleep. One time the rabbi didn't even start speaking yet. And the guy falls asleep. He says, hello, I didn't start speaking yet. He says, Rabbi, in Hebrew it goes better. Rabbi, don't worry, I rely on you. You fell asleep in the first place. I don't need you to start talking. I know when you start talking, I'll fall asleep. Back in the bed, you fall asleep in the first place. Imagine that neshama when it's standing up in heaven. In potential, it's going to do what it's got to do. It hasn't played out yet in reality. It's still virtual, not yet real. Beis Shammai there says we looked at potential. So the whole journey here on earth is really just playing out what already in reality what already took place in potential before the neshama came down. Right? So the whole thing is really not such a great achievement. We had it in potential. I look at potential. I rely on the neshama. It was going to do what it's meant to do. More than that, when we talk about the neshama, we know that in actuality it says that every neshama will come back to Hashem. There's a pasuk that says, the prophet says, "Lo yidach mimenu nidach." Nobody will be pushed away from Hashem. So the neshama is going to do what it has to do. Hashem knows that the neshama is going to do what it has to do. So according to Beis Shammai, there's no big deal to say that the tremendous ascent of the person, it's no big deal what becomes achieved through the actual journey of the man, of the person through life. And therefore, what the neshama does, so why does the neshama come down? You know why the neshama comes down? Because Hashem wants the reality of the lower worlds to be impacted and served by his agent, the neshama in a body. There's no other reason. For the self-worth of the neshama had its self-worth in potential before. It didn't have to come on this long journey. The long journey is all about Hashem wanting gira b'tachtenim. Hashem wants it to play out in actuality. Hashem's not happy with the higher worlds. He wants the lower worlds. And that's where it gets played out. Oh, Beis Hillel says, so according to Beis Shammai, there's nothing really unique for the neshama here. There's no main benefit for the neshama. The neshama could have done just as well staying up there. Hashem gets the benefit, so to speak, in the fact that the neshama comes down because Hashem's plan gets played out. However, when we talk about Beis Hillel says we go after actuality. So according to Beis Hillel, it comes out that the neshama coming down, hey, when it was still up there in heaven, I don't look at potential. I want to see, will this neshama actually fulfill? Until then, we don't know what's going to be. So the fact that the neshama comes down is very important. You have to see the neshama unfold and unpack this concept of serving Hashem. And this service of serving Hashem, which is for Hashem's purpose of creating a dwelling place in the lower world, but this also adds, there's something in it for the neshama. The neshama also benefits. So now let's look at the way they look conceptually at the purpose of life, at the journey of life, at the difficulty of life, at the travails of life. Paragraph 9. It's incredible how we see now Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have another argument. This other argument this is an argument in the Masechta Eruvin. Beis Shammai says, "Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra." It would be more pleasant for a person, easier for a person not to be created than to be created. The whole creation is a drag. It's a pain in the neck. It's much easier for the neshama would have just stayed up there. Hillel says, no. Noach lo la'adam shenivra. It's easier for a person that he was built, that he was created, more mishalo nivra, better than if he wasn't created. They both agreed that in reality, even Beis Hillel came around to Beis Shammai. He says, Noach lo la'adam shelo nivra yoter mishenivra. It would be easier for a person not to be created than to be created. Now that he was created, let him search his deeds and come closer to Hashem and do teshuvah. Okay. The Likutei Torah explains. That sounds pretty. If you think about it, it sounds a little bit depressing. It would be better we wouldn't have been born in the first place. Some people say, "Yeah, I always thought that." The Likutei Torah says, "No, you got to listen carefully to the language. It doesn't say it's better for the person not to be created. It says easier. Oh. For sure, it's better for the neshama to be created and come down below. What the neshama can have through coming down below can't be achieved by the neshama in heaven. We're talking about what's easier. Because, look, it's not so difficult to do Torah mitzvahs. I mean, for some of us it is, but if you think about it, sometimes people tell you, I don't keep any mitzvahs. If you start going through their life, you say, do you kill anybody? No. Okay, you've done the mitzvah of not killing. By the way, do you respect your parents? Yeah, of course. You've done the mitzvah, respect your parents. That guy, I just saw you give a sandwich to a poor person. No. I meant no, so that's a mitzvah. So it's not so difficult to do mitzvahs. It's easier not to be created. You know what's really difficult? What's really difficult is to really get it right. To get it right is not just to cross the T's and dot the I's and to do every detail of the mitzvahs. When we talk about getting it right is, remember what we said before, the real way of serving Hashem is not to serve Hashem for your own reason or lekabel pras to get a reward. We have to serve Hashem altruistically for Him. That's not so easy. So the question is, okay, I think we can all agree to come down and serve Hashem altruistically is not easy. Easier not to be created. It's better to come down and have that journey, but easier not. 1 second. Beit Hillel agreed in the end, easier. What was he thinking in the first place? You see, when we read an opinion in the Talmud, we don't just say, okay, he gave up his opinion, but this is Beit Hillel, this is Hillel. What was he thinking? How was he even thinking that it's easier to be born than not to be born? Says the Rebbe, explanation in this is, according to Beit Shammai, he understands the whole descent of the neshama to the world is anyway not really so beneficial for the neshama. The neshama, if we look at potential, we already knew that the neshama has his potential. The moment this beautifully fashioned piece of God, so to speak, was identified as an independent, in some way independent piece of God, which we call a neshama, good to go. Okay, we don't have to send him down to this world, really. We know he's pristine, he's good, whatever. He's gonna do the right thing. Easier if we never come down. The problem is that Hashem wants it down, because Hashem wants it in the lower worlds. But Beit Shammai, from his perspective, Beit Hillel was thinking that, this neshama that's beautiful, but still in all, if he wouldn't have been, it's better that he was created. Because to get to this ultimate high level, you need the actuality. And the fact that the neshama can reach a much higher level, because you need the actuality to play out, that makes it easy, because how shall I say? If you line up the potential gain that the neshama will have by the journey versus the pain, the maternish, the tediousness of going down below, it may even be that it's more pleasant, noach, easier, more pleasant to be born, to be created than not to be created. In other words, when you understand the stakes, imagine the Rabbi gives an example, not here, but elsewhere, about, you can be carrying a briefcase of stones, and then very heavy. You can be carrying a briefcase of diamonds, and then, it's heavy, but when you weigh out that, no one's going to complain about the heaviness. Every single additional gram that you're carrying is worth its weight in diamonds, right? Worth its weight in gold, worth its weight in diamonds. So Beis Hillel was saying, because the actuality of life is the only way you can really bring out, the potential is not enough for me. can only bring out the incredible connection the neshama has with Hashem by going down to this world and working hard to get to the place of altruism. It's worth it. It's pleasant. It's easier. It's more desirable. So 1 second. Now we've just convinced you that Beit Hillel had a good point. Better to come down to this world because it's not better. It's always better. But Noach, it's even easier because the reward far outweighs the price. So why did they agree with Beit Shammai afterwards? Say, you know what? It's better. A person wouldn't be created. Because even though the neshama can come to this high level, but when a person, we're talking to people here on earth, Beit Hillel is saying, you know what? In the end of the day, if that's what you're thinking, you're already not altruistic. You have to be thinking, you know what? From my side, nothing to be gained in reality. And you know what? I don't care. What did they say? Better not to be born. Easier not to be one to be born. And therefore says, search your deeds. Says the Rabbi in a footnote. The purpose is realize that you're not here for your own elevation. So look into your deeds. What does he want from you? That's what you're here for. So to reach that high level, that altruism, is to realize it's not about me. Remember, we said there's reward. Don't think God can't bring reward or doesn't bring reward or it's not good while we do it. It's the best thing in the world, physically, spiritually, materially, emotionally, on every level to do Hashem's will, altruistically, but not to think about it. It's a byproduct. That's not your agenda. Now we can understand what's happening. We're talking about serving Hashem like bees. We're talking about Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel. Is it better to be created, not better to be created? What's the purpose of life? How do we come down and serve Hashem altruistically? Now, says Rabbi Shimon Levi, in the end, Hashem is going to bequeath you these 310 worlds. In other words, first we have the Machlekas, paragraph 10. First we have the Machlekas is the main thing. Actuality, and therefore that person's also getting rewarded by his altruistic service, or is the main thing just potential, and therefore really, person didn't have to come down. It's Hashem who's getting enjoyment. Now he said, but we know what the Gemara says in the end, the Mishnah says in the end, that everybody agrees would have been easier for a person not to come down, because in the end of the day, it's not about the person, it's about Hashem. For the person, it doesn't need it. Don't think about the person. It's ulterior. It's no ulterior motive. It's selfless. So the Mishnah says, and that's why Hashem says, I'm going to give you something that only comes to people that are selfless, that have become totally altruistic, that are not limited to their own form and identity. You know what I'm going to give you? You're going to move into the position of becoming one with Yesh, becoming one with the absolute existence, becoming one with Hashem. The 310 worlds are Hashem's levels of enjoyment, which you become one with, and you are blissfully one with Hashem in his myriad levels of godly divine bliss that is generated through the mitzvahs, through the work that we do here. Nonetheless, it doesn't mean to say that the neshama won't get any benefit out of it. And that's why Shimon Levi also says, hello. The verse also says, the continuation of the verse, he doesn't translate what it means. I will fill up their storage houses. Don't worry. The tzaddikim storage houses in the other world, and the Rebbe puts in here in the brackets also, in this world, the Tosfot Yom Tov puts in, that even in this world, they're also going to have good. Don't worry about it. Because Hashem doesn't deny any created being its just reward. So Rabbi Shimon Levi adds, just by the way, Hashem will fill up their storage houses as well in the next world. This world's going to be good for them. But Rabbi Shimon Levi doesn't bring this as the main teaching. He says Hashem will give 310 worlds. He doesn't say Hashem will give 310 worlds and fill up their storage houses. It says Hashem will give 310 worlds, as it says, I have what to bequeath to my beloved ones. And then he also brings the continuation of the verse, and I will fill up their storage houses. To tell us that's not the main thing. That's a secondary. That's a byproduct. Don't get caught up in the Ferraris. No, that's Hashem wants you to have a Ferrari because you got to get very quick in a very reliable way from place to place. But that's not the agenda. The agenda is not even your spiritual reward. You feel good about helping somebody else. Amazing. Hashem gives you that feeling. But don't get caught up in thinking that's the point. The point is serving Hashem. Furthermore, says the Rebbe, we could say also, it's known that when Mashiach comes, the law will be like Beis Shammai. Right now, the halach is like Beis Hillel. The halach will be like Beis Shammai. One of the things that it means is that in this time, when a person feels his own entity, the halach is like Beis Hillel. Remember, we said Beis Hillel also leaves room for the identity. Beis Hillel says that when by a person coming down, because we still believe in actualization as being important, the fact that the neshama can actualize its potential is beneficial for the neshama. So that's why we're talking here now about the reality where we do feel our independent existence. So he's speaking to that identity that we have. We can't deny that we have. When Mashiach comes, everything changes. The prophet says, "V'niglek v'ed Hashem," the revelation of the glory of Hashem will be revealed. All flesh will see that the mouth of Hashem has spoken. At that time, the Yidden will become one thing with the absolute entity of Hashem, and that will be their constant existence. So when you're talking about an identity-less, when something that's totally bottled, totally self-nullified in the presence of the absolute revelation of Hashem that happens when Mashiach comes, at that time, the whole thing is about becoming one with Hashem. That's Beis Shammai kind of behavior. This is why Reb Shulman Levi is talking about the future. And he's at the end of the Mishnayos, at the end of the whole serving Hashem at the highest levels. He's done all the 6 books. He says Hashem in the future will bring the Jewish people to inherit this level of oneness with Hashem, that they'll be part of Hashem, part of the absolute existence. However, since we're learning Mishnah in this world, Rabbi Shimon Levi does us a favor. He also brings the extension of the pasuk, which says that their storage houses here physically and also spiritually, when they're still with form, with identity, we still have to talk to them in a way of Beis Hillel, where it's not just potential and that's it, but we're actually here on a mission, and the actualization of our mission is beneficial to us physically, spiritually, and so on. Hashem. So the mission also puts in that the storage houses will be filled. So what did we say? But this now let's go back, and how does this connect to the peace? How does this? The next final statement was, we explained how the argument of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, the honeycombs, serving Hashem like bees. This speaks to the serving Hashem ulterior or not ulterior, serving Him only lishma for the right reason, and that fits into the 310 worlds that the tzaddik will become one with Hashem. But how does that fit into what he says, that Hashem only found a blessing? The only blessing that could be contained for the Jewish people is shalom, peace. And Yisrael, says the Rebbe, and this is in footnote 44 in the original. Why does he speak about peace? Because he says like this. And he finishes off with a verse. Hashem ozla moyiten, Hashem gives strength to his people. Hashem yivarech tamam v'shalom, Hashem blesses his people with peace. We have to understand, first of all, what's the connection between power and peace? Second of all, you should have said, who comes first chronologically? Rabbi Shimon ben Chalafta, who said this about peace, comes before Rabbi Shimon Levi, who spoke about 310 worlds chronologically. So why isn't he given the honor of being said first? We'll understand this by understanding there's another opposite kind of question. And that is, once we talk about Hashem giving the absolute gift of oneness with Him, so how does the person retain his individuality? How does he retain his status of being a created being? Don't forget that we take on, like Nachmanides, like Ramban, that when Mashiach comes in the final agenda, the neshama will be in a body. That means there's some form. But if you've said that in the future Hashem totally absorbs all the neshamas into His oneness, into His existence, where do you have the identity? So that's why Rav Shimon ben Chalafta says that Hashem only found the vessel of peace. Hashem found the vessel of blessing for Yisrael is peace. In other words, we're not talking about blessing in general. This particular blessing of being able to absorb and give the neshamas the highest level pleasure to be absorbed in oneness of Hashem, and at the same time to retain a sense of individuality, this can only be through the concept of peace. the whole meaning of peace is to bring together differences. What is peace? If you agree with somebody, you don't need peace. Peace is about bringing together differences. So Hashem says the only way I can give my people this kind of blessing, where I'm absorbing them in the oneness, the identitylessness, non-formness of oneness with Hashem, at the same time giving them the absolute biggest reward of having them also being still in a state of existence. This needs Hashem's infinite concept of shalom, where he brings together opposites. Says the Rebbe, this is why it says li Yisro. We're not talking here about that the blessing for that the vessel for blessing for peace is for general peace. Obviously, that goes without saying. The world is blessed when they have peace. Every person is blessed when they have peace. That's a source of blessing for everybody. Here we're talking about a unique kind of peace that needs to be created, a unique kind of bringing together of opposites, high levels, very subtle, oneness with Hashem. At the same time, the benefit of identity, this requires peace, shalom. And that's why it says that Rebbe, it says Hashem gives strength to his people. What does that have to do with peace? Because Hashem has to give strength to the created being to be able to withstand this intensity of the oneness with Hashem and still have the strength to be with some form of identity. So here we've finished the learning the Sikha, at least in a peripheral way. And